All right, everyone, we're going to get started. Well, I think as most of you know, I am Clark Irvin, the Executive Director of the Homeland Security Program here at the Aspen Institute and the organizer of the Aspen Security Forum. As I said last night, for those of you who are here, which is probably most of you, this is our 7th annual Aspen Security Forum, so thank you all very much for making time out of your very busy schedules, no doubt, to be with us here in Aspen for the 7th year. This is the official start of our program, so thank you for being here this morning. I want to thank again our sponsors, IBM, Intel Security, iSight Partners, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Target. Just a couple of quick administrative words before we get into the program this morning. As some of you know, we debuted a global version of the Aspen Security Forum this past spring in April in London, and we called it, in a novel fashion, Aspen Security Forum Global. And the idea is to do that each year, so I wanted to make sure that all of you are aware of that, so look for something from us in the upcoming months about the next version of Aspen Security Forum Global in London. Furthermore, there is such demand for content about cybersecurity that we are debuting a forum, a summit, in Boston in the fall, in October 5 to be precise, exclusively on cyber, and it's called the Cambridge Cyber Summit. We're doing it in partnership with MIT and also with CNBC, so look for more information about that soon. So to start this morning's program, I should mention also that the hashtag is Aspen Security for those of you who are following us on Twitter. So to start this morning's program, we're very, very pleased to welcome to Aspen. We've been after Rick for a long time, and his global travel schedule finally permits him to be with us, Richard Engel, who is the Chief Foreign Correspondent for NBC News, who will be our moderator this morning. Please join me in welcoming Rick, who will introduce General Votel.
Well, I think we'll get right into it. So, as you all know, General Votel, CENTCOM commander, commands the most important battle space, one could say, in the world. The wars ranging from Afghanistan to the war on ISIS to and beyond. So it's a real privilege to have him here. He just came in for this. Just arrived and will be leaving shortly after, and has his whole contingency upstairs of classified computers, and he is very much at work. So without further ado, it has been so much in the news lately, and it seemed to be such an important event. How do you assess what has happened in Turkey recently and what is happening in Turkey? Now, for the record, Turkey is technically not part of his AO.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification.
But it is from Turkey in which so much of the attacks against ISIS are launched, and through Turkey that many of the ISIS fighters have traditionally transited through. So with that caveat, what do you make of events there?
First of all, thanks, Richard. Clark, thanks very much for the invitation to come back, and thanks for moderating this morning. So Turkey, of course, which resides in the European command area responsibility, really sits on an extraordinarily important seam between the central region and Europe. And so Turkey has been an extraordinarily important and vital partner in this, in all of our activities. And it's just beyond being a place where we can park our assets and launch them into Syria or Iraq or do military operations from. They have actually been integrated into the things we are doing. They are doing security operations. They are the beneficiary of the information that we are deriving in our understanding of the Islamic State and how they are moving foreign fighters, and they have responded to information that we provided to them to do things along their border. So they are absolutely vital to what we're doing. So I think as we look at the events that are taking place over the last 2 weeks, 10 days here, I think there certainly is some reason to be concerned about that. Obviously, anytime there's that, as they are working through the issues associated with a coup, which don't occur every day and certainly don't occur within NATO countries every day, I think it's something to be very, very concerned about.
What are you concerned about specifically?
What I am concerned about is that it will first and foremost is it will have an impact on the operations that we do along that very important seam. Obviously, we're very dependent on Turkey for basing of our resources. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about that it will impact the level of cooperation and collaboration that we have with Turkey, which has been excellent, frankly. And so those two areas, I think, are the areas that I am most concerned about. And working with my my fellow combatant commander in EUCOM, General Scaparrotti, that's something we will continue to work on.
Now, is this just you looking forward and analyzing the situation and saying, well, this is something we are going to be concerned about, or has something already happened in terms of ability to launch operations or cooperation that gives you reason to be concerned?
Yeah, I think you've already seen, it's been in the open press, there's some limitations on some of our activities at Incirlik Air Base. For example, the power and a few other things were shut off. That's been restored. We're kind of back to normal operations there. There are other places where we are continuing to work through some of the friction that still exists with kind of the follow-on activities. That is impacting some of our operations. We've got ways to mitigate that, to manage that right now, and we are. But I am concerned about the longer-term impact. So there are certainly near-term things that are taking place, but there are also longer-term things that are taking place. And I'll give you an example. One of the things is we've certainly had relationships with a lot of Turkish leaders, military leaders in particular. And so I'm concerned about what the impact is on those relationships as we kind of continue to move forward.
Are any of those people in jail now?
Yes, I think some of them are in jail.
Do you think that Turkey is dismantling its military and other institutions of the state? And if so, what does that mean for its ability to cooperate within NATO?
Well, that's probably a better question for the Department of State, or at least for General Scaparrotti, the EUCOM commander.
Ooh, I believe he's in the room.
Anyway, sorry, Scap. I don't know. I mean, they are absolutely, they've been an important NATO partner. They've been an important partner to us for a long period of time. And so I think we just have to, they certainly have to work through, they're a sovereign country, they have to work through their own issues. I think we have to be supportive of that where we can be, but we also have things that have to get done.
That is still a developing situation, and we will
Very much
follow that. And on something that is also developing, and probably which you can talk with an immense amount of detail about, is the campaign against ISIS in Iraq and Syria. A lot of attention has been focused on Mosul. How close is that operation? Is it real? Is ISIS getting dug in? Is this going to be a big fight? When? What can you tell us about it?
So thanks. Just in the 4 months that I've been in this position, I've been to Iraq 5 times, and I had a chance each of those times to meet with Iraqi leadership, military, and some of their Ministry of Defense leadership. And I've actually had a chance to meet with the Prime Minister on a couple of occasions. One of the things that I'm struck with as I kind of continue to visit with them is the increasing level of confidence that I see in their military leadership and their political leadership.
The Iraqi government.
The Iraqi government confidence in their operations and in the approach that they are taking. Now, I say that, and I'll caveat it by saying there's certainly a lot left to do, and it's far from perfect. They don't approach things the same way we would. They've got different orientation, different approach, and that's fine. That's their approach. But there is a growing level of confidence that the military operations that they are doing are having the effects that we desire against ISIL. And so I think you've seen now over the last several months a number of operations, Fallujah, the most recent operations up in Kiara, that have been very, very successful from a military standpoint and have pushed the Islamic State back. And I think what you're seeing is a strategy in both that we are trying to orchestrate in both Iraq and Syria, where we are trying to present ISIL with many dilemmas They have to deal with a lot of things. And I think when we're able to do that, I think it gives us the ability to overwhelm them, and it makes it more difficult for them to respond to that. So part of our strategy has been simultaneity, to do a whole bunch of things at the same time to them in a variety of locations. And I think that strategy is working for us as we move forward. So I do see military progress on the ground in both of those areas. You asked about Mosul. I won't lay out a specific timeline for you. We will go to Mosul when it's time to go to Mosul. Getting ready to go to Mosul isn't just about having the military plan in place. We've got a concept for how we can do that. But the more important part of going to Mosul is the political governance plan. It is the stabilization plan. It is the humanitarian plan. And those three things really have to be put into place before we can actually execute, I think, a very successful military operation. From a military standpoint, the key thing we're focused on is force generation, generating the brigades, retraining the brigades, making sure we've got the right amount of force. One of the important thoughts that came out of last week's defense ministerials that was shared with me is that we shouldn't be in too much of a rush to get to Mosul, frankly. Making sure these 4 plans we talked about, that we've got the right force in place is very, very important.
4 plans?
Well, the humanitarian stabilization, political plan, and the military plan. All of that's got to be orchestrated.
So to stay in Iraq for a minute, it is a very messy battlefield. You have Shia militias operating there, some of them tied to Iraqi clerics, some of them tied to Iran. You have the Kurds who are operating there, some of which have different loyalties. Some are loyal to Syria, some are loyal to different groups. You obviously have the Iraqi army. How is this being coordinated?
Yeah,
How much of the fighting is being done by the official Iraqi army, by the militia, by the Kurds?
Well, I can tell you that in the most recent operation that we've done up in Kiara, that was completely by the Iraqi security forces, by the Iraqi army. They came up both sides of that. They orchestrated the river crossing, which frankly was a pretty significant river crossing by anybody's standards. So they're done that. Now there certainly are a lot, as you point out, as we saw in Fallujah, there were a lot of different organizations there. There was Iraqi security forces, there was their special operations forces, there were the Shia PMF element was involved, there were police elements involved. So orchestrating that, I think, is a challenge.
Who does the deconfliction?
The deconfliction,
place?
and principally of that is done at the MOD and at the Prime Minister level. Prime Minister Badi has been extraordinarily involved in the decision making for many of these operations, and I think he's demonstrated a pretty good ability to understand both the tactical and operational aspects of the things we're doing, and to provide the right guidance to help. So far, to help manage that problem that you just talked about.
And how blunt are the conversations? Do you say to Abadi or someone from the U.S. government, say, we don't want the Shia militias in there? You have to tell them they can go on a different day, or they can come from the south, and we're going to come from the north. Is it
much like we do with our own leadership? Well, our responsibility as senior military leaders, and in this particular role, is to provide our best military advice. And so we do that, and that does include very blunt discussions in terms of how we think they ought to best approach things, given the forces they have, given the other things that are taking place on the battlefield. I guess the one thing I would just, if I could just kind of go back a little bit, and I think it's important to recognize the approach that we are taking here. This approach is different than when we were in Operation Iraqi Freedom and OEF in Afghanistan, is we are very much in a by, with, and through approach here. We are working through our partners. It is about them doing this, and so our role is different this time, and it is a different approach. So it doesn't go as fast as we would want it to go. It doesn't go as effectively as we would want it to go. They don't do all the same tactical or operational things that we might want to do, but our goal is using our expertise, using our capabilities to enable them, and using our, our advice and our experiences to help them through that. And in my experience, and relatively minimal here in 4 months in the time that I've been in this position and from my previous positions, they've been good about taking that advice on board.
So let's leave Iraq for a second and head up north towards Syria. The border between Iraq and Syria, still open? Militants still able to cross that border?
Well, it's a huge border, so it's porous, and I think there's probably some that are able to move back and forth across that. That said, I think the situation along the border is much more stable, particularly between Iraq and Syria, particularly in the Kurdistan area, is much more stable than it has been. I think as you've moved further out to the west, kind of in the Anbar portion of Iraq, I think that's probably still fairly open there.
The city of Aleppo is currently under siege. There are estimates of about 350,000 people inside the city. They are almost entirely surrounded. The main hospitals in the city were just bombed a couple of days ago. There's fears of mass starvation in the city. It is being attacked by Assad forces and Russian forces. What happens to Aleppo, and what does it mean for your mission?
Well, I think what it means for the mission is that, as you pointed out, it means that there's a human disaster that's taking place here right now that will have to be addressed at some particular point. And as people move in and out of that area, and as they respond to the situation on the ground, it's going to create impacts on our ability to go after our principal objective, which is the Islamic State. And so I am concerned about what is taking place there. And again, any person, doesn't have to be a military person, anybody look at that can't find it acceptable to see the human suffering situations taking place there.
A lot of this conference seems to be focused on countering the messaging of violent extremism and how to stop ISIS. But if you're living in Aleppo or anywhere near Aleppo and you see a large city surrounded and the people starting to starve to death as they have been starving to death in other places, isn't that the best message for violent extremism? How do you counter that with an online app or a scrubbing of the internet?
I think the way you counter the Islamic State's ideology is you have to expose it for what it is. And I think that is what the approach is that we are taking. Now, certainly we have military capabilities that we are using, but we are also working very closely with the Department of State and their Global Engagement Center that has kind of been retooled to focus on this. But I think the strategy here is to expose ISIL for what they are and to call them out for the things that they are doing. And I do think we are beginning to make progress in that particular area. Certainly, it's a great strength for them. It's certainly something that fits into their center of gravity and something we have to stay focused on. But I think, in my view, that's the approach we have to take.
I asked about Aleppo first on purpose because it leads to where I'm going now. There is this campaign against Aleppo by the Assad regime and Russia. The U.S. and the State Department has made it quite clear is making more and more overtures toward Russia. How is that coordination with Russia right now? Is it collaboration? Is it coordination? Is it a synchronized policy?
It's none of the above from my perspective. What we do militarily with Russia right now is deconfliction in the air to ensure safety of flight. And that's the principal mechanism. We do that every day with them, and it's done in a positive and it's done in a professional manner where we ensure flight safety of operations for both of our forces that are operating in what can become a congested airspace, and that I think has worked. But what you're alluding to here is not in place yet. I mean, we're obviously aware and paying very, very close attention to the ongoing discussions that are taking place, and when that has been resolved and when directions have been provided to us, we'll be prepared to move to whatever the next level is that we work with them.
So at your level, it's strictly deconfliction to make sure that
that's
the planes
the best
don't
way.
shoot
Yeah,
each other
that's
down.
the best way I describe it. It's about ensuring safety of flight and making sure that we are not shooting on their stuff and they're not on ours.
So if there is a Russian Assad campaign, which is moving toward Raqqa, and then there is a US-led campaign moving toward Raqqa, who gets there first?
Well, I guess we'll see. I think that's clearly something that's not a discussion that's really, I think, come to pass yet on that, because I don't think either of us are necessarily in a position, as you are well aware, we're very much involved in our operations out in the Manbij area, and that's been a priority for us, and we'll finish that first, and then we'll begin to look to the next phase of this, which will ultimately take us down towards Raqqa. But as we move forward in that, then we'll continue to use the mechanisms we have in place or new ones that are provided to us to help address that.
What about with the Assad regime? Any deconfliction there? Any coordination there?
None from us.
None directly from the military?
We're not talking to the Assad regime. You
mentioned Manbij, and there was an article this morning in the New York Times about a large trove of documents. I think 10,000 was the number mentioned. These were documents supposedly taken from Manbij, which was a center of foreign fighters, ISIS foreign fighters in Syria. How important are these documents? What's
well, it's extraordinarily important, and this is a big deal, I think, but it's not a new deal. I mean, the idea of capturing enemy material and exploiting it, try to understand it to help our operations certainly isn't anything new. It's been a basis for how we approach things for a long time. It's a key part of our network on network approach that we take. So I think it's extraordinarily important, and we've been very well supported by the intelligence community and the interagency in helping exploit that information. I think it is providing us, is beginning to provide us deeper understanding into certainly their tactics and techniques. It's given us a better understanding on how they orchestrate things like foreign fighters. It gives us ideas about how they are communicating among themselves. It gives us idea how they are managing their resources.
What are these documents? In the past, and I've come across some documents as well, we had ISIS registration folders. These were personnel files. Are these new documents?
Yeah, I think it's Richard. It's all of the above. It's data associated with computers. It's hard copy papers. It's files. It's directories like you just highlighted there. So it's a combination of a lot of stuff. It's videos. It's pictures. It's all kinds of stuff that we see. So,
in the past, ISIS has always been very quick at its ability to regenerate. U.S. military takes 1,000 fighters off the battlefield. The next month, they get 1,000 new recruits. Are they still replacing their numbers as quickly? And if not, why not?
Yeah, I think the global community here, largely led by our law enforcement professionals, and certainly in our country and in a variety of other countries here, are doing a much better job today of helping to control the flow of foreign fighters that came so heavily at the beginning of this into Syria and eventually into Iraq. So while I won't give you any numbers, because I don't really have any that are particularly super reliable here in terms of that. But as I look at this data over time, I definitely see a decrease in the amount of foreign fighters that are able to successfully reach Iraq and Syria, and I see the tangible things that many of our partners, law enforcement, military, others are doing to better control the flow in. So I think we are doing a better job with that. But if I could just to talk a little bit about ISIL. This is I would share 3 observations about this. This is a connected enemy. What they do in Iraq and Syria has influences outside of there. I mean, we're well aware of the caliphate and the different provinces that they stood up that, go from North Africa, all the way down to Southeast Asia in terms of that. So it is a connected network. They are able to influence or perhaps direct things that are taking place outside of this. So the things that we are attacking in places like Manbij will have an impact on that. It probably won't stop it, but it'll have an impact on it. They're vulnerable. And so this what you just talked about, this exploitation, this treasure trove of material will make them more vulnerable, and we will exploit that. And they are adaptive, and we will expect them to adapt.
Jay Johnson last night spoke about a third level of ISIS involvement. He talked about directed, inspired, and something in between, where they're encouraged or sort of nudged along. Are you seeing more of that? Where you have, if let's say Orlando is a typical inspired, doesn't seem like they had any direct linkages, and Paris, Bataclan as a direct attack where militants from the heart of the Islamic State went out and did the attack.
Yeah,
Are we seeing something in between emerging?
I would generally agree with that approach. I think again, it's an adaptive organization, and so they're looking for any way that they can propagate their ideology and approach.
ISIS is not the only extremist group in Syria and Iraq. Particularly in Syria, there is a group called the Nusra Front. Now, the Nusra Front started off as the official al-Qaeda affiliate, and a lot of Nusra Front members bled away and joined ISIS. Are you seeing now that ISIS is being attacked, more people heading back to the Nusra Front? And the reason also the Nusra Front is interesting right now, the group in its internal dialogue keeps talking about rebranding itself, officially denouncing its ties to ISIS in order to make it more palatable to the local community, to make it seem more legitimate. Are you following that?
Oh yeah, we absolutely are. And to your last comment there, again, I just take you back. These organizations are extraordinarily savvy. They're extraordinarily adaptive, and so we should expect that they're doing things. And while they can maybe grow another branch of the tree that makes it look a little different, that branch comes back into the core ideology and core approach. So at the center of it, it's still Al Qaeda.
So if Nusra renounces its ties to Al Qaeda, it doesn't impact.
I've set aside policy discussions and other things that might be associated with that. To me, it doesn't make a significant difference. They are an organization to be concerned about.
Do you think they are an organization to be concerned about long term? There was David Ignatius, who I also believe is in the room, wrote an article not long ago saying that there's real concern and growing concern about Nusra's lethality, its aggressiveness.
Yes, I personally would share in that assessment.
So
that we should be concerned about them long term.
Not just focused on
what they're doing here.
Changing of the subject a little bit, and then I want to open it up to some questions. Iran. The Iran nuclear deal was designed to change Iran's behavior. Has it?
No, I don't think that it has changed their behavior. I think it's addressed a specific threat that existed. And I think it's probably been successful in addressing that, or certainly at least putting it off for a number of years. But it has not necessarily changed the behavior that we see in Central Command with respect to Iran. I still have FACs and FIACs that operate in close proximity to U.S. vessels that transit through the Arabian Gulf. We still see them supporting organizations like Lebanese Hezbollah. We still see them supporting the Assad regime. We still see them with their linkages into places like Bahrain. We still see them backing the Houthi network. We still see aspects of their cyber ambition. So I personally have not seen a change in behavior.
A recent announcement, the president recently announced that the troop levels in Afghanistan would not decline at the previously announced rate, that they would be somewhat higher, more troops for longer potentially. Mm-hmm. Why? What's going on in Afghanistan? Why couldn't the troop levels go down?
Well, I think as we've talked about in the past, at least on the military side here, is these decisions have to be conditions based. They can't be time based. And so as we looked at that situation, I think we looked at the conditions on the ground, and we made our best military advice, our best recommendation that we should stay at a level that was higher than we had anticipated.
But is it the Taliban's growing strength? Is it the Afghan government's weakness? Is it ISIS's strength? What is it that?
I think it might be a little bit of a combination of all of that. I think as I look at just the enemy situation in a place like Afghanistan, we do see an aggregation of these organizations in a way that we have not necessarily seen before. So we see Taliban as much more closely linked to the Haqqani network, for example. Siraj Haqqani is now the deputy, leader of the Taliban. That's different. We've seen Al Qaeda now twice. Professed bayat to the Taliban, and there's been other organizations that have kind of come together with it. And so there has been this level of collaboration and cooperation between these groups. I think that has made this a more dangerous threat. And so we've tried to pay attention to that. If I could say, just about Afghanistan, since you raised it here, again, I would tell you. Right now, the Afghan forces, with the assistance of our coalition that is there, are executing a successful sustainable security strategy. They've been very successful in Kunduz, where they started. They were successful down in Helmand. They've moved their operations up into the Nangarhar area here in accordance with their plan, and they actually are achieving their objectives. But more importantly, they're preventing the Taliban and the organizations that are associated with that from achieving their objectives. They're doing that at an extraordinarily heavy cost. I'm concerned about their casualties. I'm concerned about their sustainability. We've got to pay attention to that. So the train and advise, assist that we keep in with the elevated numbers, along with our USCT element, I think is really properly organized and sourced right now to do what we need to do.
Do you think it's a forever war? Do we have troops in Afghanistan the same way we have troops in Korea for decades and decades?
I don't know if it's a forever war, defined forever. I think we have to be committed to this. I think this is a protracted conflict against these organizations. A successful operation in Mosul won't eliminate ISIL. They will go to the next version of ISIL, and they will adapt, and we will have to adapt. I think this is a protracted fight, and we have to stay with them, and we have to stay with our partners as we move forward.
I'm sure there are a lot of questions. You had your hand up first. Maybe someone can come with you. And while he's coming to you, just allow me to say thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Richard.
And it's already been very interesting. So, please.
Lukman Faili used to be Iraqi ambassador until 3 weeks ago. Let me first thank you for all the work you and your colleagues have done in Iraq, and we're very much appreciative of that. In relation to the last question you raised, and in relation to troops availability or numbers in the region, with the opportunity lost of not having a SOFA with Iraq before, and the reactionary need over the last few years just to cope and deal with ISIS, where do you see the troop level in 3 to 5 years, specifically with your partners in the region and in relation to the legal status and in relation to effectiveness moving forward? I'm aware that you're more military rather than sort of your political masters, but here I would like to see from CENTCOM perspective, where do you see and your confidence level?
Well, again, I think the specific numbers and the details of those arrangements, Your Excellency, will certainly have to be addressed, and there'll be a mechanism for doing that. My perspective is this: that when we stay partnered with our partners on the ground, when we stay with them, we see better performance, we see better results, we see more resolve in terms of it. It's interesting to me that as we look at the Iraqi security forces, one of the elements of the Iraqi security forces that has been so successful is their counterterrorism service. And the CTS, the counterterrorism service, is an organization that we did not break our partnership with, and we kept it after 2011. And as a result, I think we saw that was a more proficient, more capable force in the early days of the fighting, and they have borne an extraordinary burden of the fighting so far, and perhaps as they should, because of the most capable element. So from my perspective as a CENTCOM commander, I think where we are able to partner with people, where we're able to develop long-term relationships, long-term systems is always best. And so, without getting out in front of my political leadership here, as I look at it, my inclination is to kind of continue to make recommendations that allow us to do that at the right levels.
There seemed to be almost a longing in his question, which was, is the U.S. going to leave us again?
Well, I think we've made an investment there with our people, with our lives. We certainly understand the importance of the area. So, again, from the perspective of the CENTCOM commander, looking forward without the benefit of any policy discussion on that, my inclination would be, yeah, we should stay. Yes, these are our partners. We've expended a lot here.
Kim Dozier.
Thank you. General Votel, in terms of degrading ISIS, do you need to take out Omar al-Baghdadi, or has the targeting of the mid-level commanders been more effective? I mean, you've spent 15 years of your long professional career targeting various militants, and yet they keep coming back. So can you also give us a state of where is ISIS internally? Are they riven with infighting? Do you see further cuts to their salary, et cetera?
Yeah, great question. So on the first part of your question there, I certainly think that it's important. Leadership matters. It matters to us. It's certainly got to matter to them. So when you do remove leadership, it does create an impact. They are an organization that is resilient, just as we are an organization that is resilient. So when a leader falls out, somebody steps into it. We should expect that that's going to take place, and we should continue. Our operations have got to continue to put pressure on those leadership networks all the time, so they don't have the ability to regenerate over time. And as I think as we've seen in the past, we have an ability to do that. It takes time to do that, but a persistent pressured approach to those leadership networks, I think, makes a difference in the long run. And certainly, I think we see that in a number of areas. To the other part of your question, I see a network that is under increasing pressure. When I look at ISIL, I'll just take you back to my comments earlier here. I mean, the big idea here is multiple dilemmas. We are coming after you in Anbar in multiple locations. We are coming after you in the Tigris River Valley. We are on top of you in northern Syria, and we've got efforts in southern Syria, and we're doing high-value strikes across both of those countries, and we've got a variety of other things going on with respect to that. And so what I see is a network that is having to deal with that. And so as we have addressed their resources, we've taken away significant portions of their financial resources, of their oil resources, which they use to generate stuff. It's not solved. They're still able to do some of that, and we'll continue to focus on that. But we've put a lot of pressure on them. We've killed a lot of their fighters. Their ability to regenerate that is more difficult. I think we've seen in Fallujah, we've seen signs of infighting between foreign fighters and some of the other established ISIL leadership that is in there, and disagreements over that. So, we will continue to foment that. So I think the best way I would describe this is a network under pressure, and it's one that we want to keep the pressure on.
Multiple dilemmas.
Multiple dilemmas.
Not Operation Barbarossa heading toward Mosul. It's more of an insurgents type campaign.
I wouldn't.
Lots of attacks in lots of different places.
I think when you go, one of the ways that you make this network have to overwork is by giving it a lot of problems.
Please.
I'm with MIT Seminar 21. I want to ask about the knowledge of our own troops. When we went into Afghanistan, there were only 6 people at the CIA who knew Arabic well enough to be able to read the newspapers and talk. It seems to me understanding the cultures and the people we have to work with is absolutely key to what I'm going to call success, but I don't know what success looks like anymore. So my question is, do you ever make any requests from our educational system to start expanding the skills of understanding others, recognizing that we live in a very complex world, and so much of our education is so one lens driven, and leadership from someone like you would, I think, help make the changes that we need in our educational system.
Yeah, thanks for your question. First of all, to answer your question directly, I probably don't make that demand as clear as I should, but I will tell you I absolutely agree with what you are saying. We have a lot of expertise that's been developed because we've had people in the area. We had, for example, Secretary Carter's Defense Innovation Board was down visiting us earlier this week, and this was a specific discussion right here. That as we look at innovation within the Department of Defense, part of that is it's partly about technology, it's partly about ideas, but it's also about bringing the right talent, the human talent into this, and reaching out and developing people that have what you just talked about, have better understanding of the culture. They've come from that area, for example. So I absolutely agree with you, and I think that's definitely something we ought to be doing here as we move forward.
Jay. You're micless. While they get a mic over to you, can we get a quick question over there? You're holding a mic, and Jane will get right after you. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Evan Fury, I'm with Statoil. General, when you think about the campaign against Al-Qaeda, now ISIS, I think we're on Al-Qaeda 4.0 or 5.0 since it really came to global attention after 9/11. How do you see this evolving? Can you give us a glimpse behind your sort of longer-term thinking about how to anticipate the defeat of ISIS militarily and what it's going to become in the next iteration of this long war?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you know, sometimes we get so caught up in currently what we're doing, we don't put enough thought into that. But you know, I think as I mentioned to you a little bit earlier, I think we recognize this is going to be a protracted approach here, and so what we have to expect is that they are going to adapt, and as we remove their ability to govern and own terrain, they're going to continue to move to more innovative ways of trying to conduct their operations. You know, I think, you know, unfortunately, whether the attack in Nice was inspired or what the relationship is there, maybe I'm not completely certain on it. But I think it's a reminder for us of just how adaptive this can be, where our focus is on their use of explosives, but then they use something like a semi-truck to, a semi-truck can be used to create the similar effects. So what I think is, I think what we have to do is we have to better understand the ideology. I think we have to be more focused in terms of going into the areas that are most vulnerable and beginning to shape and work with those populations and our partners in those areas to begin to address some of the underlying issues that begin in this. I think ultimately that's where we have to go with this. We do have to address the underlying issues that continue to feed this ideology and to feed this sense of despair that leads people to adopt this approach.
So we only have 2 minutes left. So Jane, and then I'll see if I can squeeze in one more if there's time.
Well, Richard, first, thank you for your extraordinary insights and bravery. I think a lot of us have learned so much from you. To you, General, we've learned, sadly, that in this quest for a two-state solution, we seem to want it more than the parties want it. And my question to you is, do the parties in the region, the leaders of the country and the countries and the people in the countries want stability and pluralism as much as we do? Yeah,
that's a great question, and and I think it's why it's so important that this, you know, as I talk about this discussion of governance, this discussion of the political, you know, solution here is such an important one to our military operations. We've got to go with it. I see two different things. I see in some cases people who aspirationally think for their own sovereignty that we need to be a separate part here. We have a separate part of the country for the Kurds or whoever it happens to be here. But I also see the reality that sometimes seeps into that their ability to economically support that, to do that type of stuff may be challenged. So, you know, I see a little bit of both sides of that as I talk to people in the region, that there is, you know, certainly is some aspirational aspect to this. It certainly continues to come up, but I also see the reality of that being effectively implemented. And I certainly don't think there's a military solution to that, but it's certainly something that I think has to be addressed.
And last question. It's often been said that you can't win a war if you don't know how it ends. You don't know what victory looks like. What does victory look like here? There's this disruption campaign, multiple dilemmas against ISIS, but the behavior of Turkey, as you said, is concerning and unclear. The alliance between Russia and Assad is at a strictly deconflicting level, you said. So aside from bothering ISIS and killing its fighters, how do you see the end game? How do you see the victory?
All right, that's a question that's hard to answer like in 30 seconds.
You take 2 minutes.
Okay, so let me just say, I mean, I think, you know, the success to me, the victory in your term here, I think what it looks like, I think it looks like holding our coalition together and being able to prevent ISIL from doing the things that it is doing right now. That is controlling terrain, you know, continuing with their very toxic ideology and preventing them from perpetrating attacks outside of the areas in which they are. That's to me a success. I think success for us is also continuing to preserve our influence in the area. It's continuing to support our objectives in the area of not allowing that area to be used as a platform for attacks on our capital or on the capitals of of our other coalition partners here. I think it, you know, continuing to kind of preserve our decision space as we kind of move forward, so we can continue to address the bigger, longer term issues of this. So I'm summarizing here, but I mean, I think to me, you know, I don't think there's going to be a big victory parade in this. I think it's about prevailing, staying one step ahead. I think of this very much as a wrestling match. We wrestle, we score a point, and then we move on to the next moves in this thing. And if you do that enough, eventually you end up prevailing. And that's kind of how I think we have to look at this.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.